Washington Post reporter Jeff Stein just broke this story. President Trump was in the middle of formally drafting a demand for larger stimulus payments in the next relief bill when White House aides intervened on Thursday.
Oh, my God. As of now, adults will receive somewhere around $600 and an additional $600 per child. There will be no family cap on that amount. And adult dependents do qualify. That is different than what was in the CARES Act. Jeff joins us now to give us the absolute latest based on his reporting. Always great to see you, Jeff.
Good to see you, Jeff.
Thank you guys so much for having me back on.
Of course, always. So just bring us up to speed on where the negotiations stand and what the timeline looks like at this point.
Sure. So we have real final movement after months of the football being pulled away from Charlie Brown. He is actually maybe going to kick it this weekend. Lawmakers have agreed on basically a $900 billion framework, hundreds of billions of dollars in unemployment aid for small businesses, and another one-time $600 check per person. And there are some remaining hurdles, but the ones that we've identified and that we've heard about and that aid very close to negotiations who are talking to us about it, they say these hurdles should be overcome. And so really, we have seen almost no relief for the American people since March, despite the worsening pandemic. And a constellation of factors seem to finally be bringing lawmakers to actually getting something done, maybe as soon as tomorrow or Sunday.
So this is interesting here, Jeff. Tell us about the advisors. And everybody wants to know names. If you can reveal those names, let us know about who exactly are these geniuses who have been turning. Those are my words, not yours. I'm not putting anything in your mouth. About who these people are. And what is the rationale behind this? I mean, would it have actually killed the deal? I'm just skeptical of that.
Well, I obviously can't say.
Yeah.
I think the important thing to keep in mind here is, the president has wanted to send another round of stimulus checks since June. He's been adamant about that. He said it privately. He said basically that publicly, and we've reported that this whole time. And I think as Trump leaves, one of the only recent presidents to be defeated after one term, one of the major questions is, did the economic populism that he at least superficially campaigned on in 2016, did he abandon that office? And I think the question of his inability to get another round of stimulus checks is bringing that sort of latent question to the fore. And we've seen this over and over again, where he has these impulses that are not like the normal traditional business Republicans. And often, he surrounded himself, including by the aides that are in the story, by people who are skeptical of that mission. And, I don't know. I mean, I think the generous interpretation is like, hey, these are very sensitive negotiations. A huge last-minute demand from the president could throw a wrench in things. And so Republicans are trying to hold on to those 2 Georgia Senate seats. And maybe there's like a real risk there for the Republican Party. But there's certainly this long-running tension between Trump's sort of quasi-economic populist instincts, at least, and the governance reality and his coalition partners with the Republican Party. And this is such a vivid, dramatic, and kind of honestly fun example of that.
Yeah, I mean, great reporting uncovering that. Jeff also talked to us about this collaboration between Bernie and Senator Josh Hawley, and how instrumental was that in ultimately forcing at least some check to go out. How are they feeling about the state of the negotiations? Are they both ready to vote yes on the package that looks like it's coming together?
Yeah, there was a ton of criticism and a lot of sniping, in private in particular, where Hill aides and lawmakers were like, these 2 weirdos who were coming up with this demand at the last minute, like, I just wish they would shut up. And, what they were doing is they were threatening essentially to shut down the government unless they got a vote on the stimulus checks bill. And that's a very hardball kind of tactic, and it got a lot of blowback. And obviously it's very, very hard to say what caused what, but after that, it seems like, the bipartisan Senate proposal that was released by Manchin and Romney and other Republican and Democratic senators did not have the stimulus checks. Then congressional leaders went into negotiations. Around the same time, Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Josh Hawley were threatening legislation over the stimulus checks vote. And then on the other end of that, the legislation included one $600 check. So, I mean, not clear to me exactly that was the rationale, but at the very least, they see it as a partial victory, and they've sort of toned down their rhetoric about insisting on a vote on this if they don't, and otherwise they would check with the government.
So, Jeff, we're talking Friday. Deal's still not done. What are the sticking points? What is left in order to be hammered out? Everybody said it was coming in 24 hours on Thursday. It's been 48 hours since then. McConnell says we're on the 1 yard line. What's the issue here?
Well, there are a bunch, and they're pretty boring, but I'll just try to all of them. I think the main substantive one is that Republicans are trying to constrain the unilateral lending power of the Federal Reserve and Treasury Department. There's a lot of heat on both sides. Democrats want to preserve the ability of the Fed and Treasury to sort of get creative with emergency loans if the situation deteriorates under Biden. There's big fights over some of, Chuck Schumer is trying to push $17 billion for music venues and it's an act called Save Our Stages, and there's a lot of concern about those venues being permanently shuttered. Republicans think that money should go to restaurants and this sort of general PPP fund, so that's another sticking point. I could review some of the others, but they sort of aren't of massive consequence. I mean, the other really big one is Republicans are resistant towards extending the eviction moratorium. They say that we should just approve more rental assistance money. Democrats also want rental assistance money, but say that we need a ban on, or at least a temporary forestalling of evictions to allow people to recover rather than just be thrown out on the streets at this really challenging moment. So those are important sticking points, but they really don't seem like things that should hold up a nearly $1 trillion deal.
Yeah. And finally, Jeff, we and you and I think the audience that watches the show are pretty well versed in some of the things that are lacking in this bill and how insufficient it ultimately is, especially when you compare it to the response of other developed nations around the world. But that doesn't mean that there isn't anything in here that would really be beneficial to people who are struggling right now. Can you just detail some of the key provisions, some of the larger programs that are involved here and what people can expect to be included in the final deal?
I think a useful way to think about the deal is sort of like it combines, Republicans' top priorities and Democrats' top priorities, and they are both okay living with the other party's top priorities in some way. So from the Republican perspective, there's over $300 billion in PPP money, small business relief. That's what one of their top demands. And from the Democratic perspective, there's maybe $250 billion for unemployment insurance. That's $300 per week for tens of millions of people who are unemployed, lost their jobs. That could alleviate a lot of suffering in the next few months, and there's a lot of important relief that will be gained from that. There's also tens of billions of dollars for other critical needs across the country. $82 billion for education money, about $50 billion for transportation and transit agencies, $25 billion for renters, $26 billion in hunger and assistance relief. So there are things here that will alleviate the suffering. I know a lot of people, understandably, are saying, "Hey, we got one $1,200 check in March, and it's been months and months and months. So why can't we at least get another $1,200 check?" And that's the argument Sanders and Hawley and some others on the Hill have been making, but Republicans are insistent that the price tag of the bill remain below $1 trillion. And once you accede to that premise, which appears to be the requirement for getting Republicans on board with this, then it becomes a lot harder to include a robust check and other things. Sanders argued yesterday, why don't we just scale back the small business relief and provide bigger checks, which is another perspective on this.
Yeah. Jeff, such a great job on this. We know things are going a little better because you're wearing your jacket and tie again versus the T-shirts that as things were looking more grim.
I read some of the comments a couple months ago that's like, Jeff just rolls out of bed, puts on a T-shirt, and goes on rides.
See, your main mistake was reading the comments section. Can't do that.
They were tracking
with that admission. Yeah.
They were tracking. They were charting the correlation between like how kempt and well groomed you were versus the state of the negotiation. So we can
he's
tell.
looking good
It's like the Times election needle, but for the stimulus.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So now that
Jeff
we see you with the
needle.
jacket and the tie on, looking good there, Jeff, we know that things are going to be moving in a positive direction. We appreciate you so much. If we don't get to talk to you again, happy holidays, Jeff.
Thank
you so much.
Yeah, you too. Merry Christmas. Bye.
See you later.
Coming up, former senior advisor of the Bernie Sanders campaign, David Sorote, is going to talk about the new trend towards austerity extremism, in particular within the Democratic Party. That when Rising returns.